Morell's problem was that at the time in 43, it was a war economy in Germany, so it was very difficult to bring new medicines onto the market. Basically, it was not possible, like all the tests that usually are done in peace times on a new medicine. So he said this to Hitler, like, I'm developing all these new medicines from all these organs, and I cannot bring them on the market. They cannot help the German people sustain in this war. And then Hitler said, this is bullshit. I, the Führer, will be your guinea pig, and I will test all these dubious concoctions that you make. And then, because when I take it, every German, can take it, and we kind of bypass all the regulations. And this is exactly what happened. So Hitler actually became the guinea pig for like hormonal concoctions for Morell. So this is it's really an insane story that is beautifully documented. So you can like read like train wagons going from the Ukraine, from the German army, like very scarce it was to have a whole train wagon, because they needed to ship, wounded soldiers back, or ammunition, and he just, required like whole train wagons filled with this offal from the slaughterhouses and all the livers of all the slaughtered pigs in the Ukraine. And then the army was like, we can't do this. We need these wagons for like war sensitive stuff, and then Morell would run to Hitler and say, the army is blocking me transporting these precious materials that I can turn into drugs for the common good of the German people. And Hitler wrote an order, and then the wagon was going through, and then Morell was creating these concoctions. And Hitler actually, he took too many of these weird things, his health started deteriorating in 43. Like, he was quite healthy until 41 to 43, when he took all these organ things and all these hormones and, crazy stuff. Today you would send the doctor that prescribes you that stuff to prison, But, there was no checks and balances. Like, Hitler just took because he liked Morell and he liked to experiment, and they were always talking about new, enhancement of the body. That was a whole Nazi idea, to become more powerful, more strong, So he was interested in these things, and he actually, his health started to deteriorate. And then by 43, he had already become quite a different man. He aged quite a lot. I mean, you can see it if you compare the young Hitler with like just 5 years later. He looks like 20 years older, And then in 43, because he's doing so poorly, like his chi, you would say today, your physical energy was like really down. If you get like one pig liver extract injection a day, you can imagine how you're gonna feel like after like a year or so. It's not very healthy. So it diminished.
So what was the goal of the pig liver extract? Did they just want to
enhance energy? Like, they then gave it to the German soldiers. Like, they drank this stuff, because it's like liver is always like filled with like nutrients, I guess. So that's why, some people think, and I would probably agree, that it's healthy to eat like liver. Like,
they think like an ounce of liver a day is probably the right amount. But injecting pig liver.
So Hitler, technically speaking, wasn't a vegetarian at all, because he was using all these animal, supplements and
just wasn't consuming them with his mouth.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So do you know the famous story about Hitler meeting Mussolini, where Mussolini wanted to get out of the war?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I write about that in Blitz, because that is the first time. Like, Hitler was quite depressed before the meeting and felt betrayed, because Mussolini wanted to leave the war effort. This was in July 1943. Like, Mussolini said, this is not working. We rather get out. Okay, is that fine with you if we just leave the Axis now? And Hitler's like, no, it's not fine, So he was very nervous before that meeting, and was in a villa in northern Italy. And he asked Morell again for something stronger. And then Morell, for the first time, presented what then would become Hitler's favorite drug, and this was a German drug called Eukodal, and it's quite interesting. Eukodal was made by the Merck company, which is still a pharmaceutical giant today, and it's an opioid. It's an opioid that makes you, if you inject it intravenously, quite euphoric, but also quite calm. You're not crazy if you're on Eukodal intravenously. You think you're like on top of the world. It's like you feel so great. And Hitler loved this drug. Like he got it injected before the meeting with Mussolini. On the way to the plane, he asked for another injection. He loved it so much. And then like people who were at the meeting in this villa said that Hitler was just, talking nonstop, like I'm doing right now. Like talking, no, we're actually having a conversation. We're having a conversation.
Yes, we are.
Hitler and Mussolini did not have a conversation. Hitler was talking like for 3-4 hours without stopping. And Mussolini became very sweaty, and like aides came in and handed him papers that Rome is being bombed the very minute. But he couldn't get out. Like Hitler was very dominant in the room, very, very dominant in the room. And from that moment on, Eukodal became kind of his favorite drug. And now comes the pun. When Germany lost, a lot of patents were also lost from Germany and became possession of America. And the patent of Eukodal also traveled to America. And Eukodal is oxycodone. So what has created the American opioid crisis is the very same opioid that was Hitler's favorite opioid.
Wow.
Sold in America as pills, but, crushed and sniffed, whatever, inject, I don't know, Hitler was injecting it from the start, He didn't fuck around with pills, because he still had these stomach problems. He didn't like a medicine to go orally, like he didn't like it took too long, You don't know, you take something now and it's acting like in 45 minutes, and not good, The injection is the immediate effect. So that's what he wanted. He would go to a military briefing when the war was in 44, the generals were just, they knew it was lost. They came from the Eastern Front, people were dying like every day. Like it was over. But they came to the meeting to tell Hitler basically, or you want to save your men, But Hitler on oxycodone, on Eukodal, as it was called then, had so much power in the room, like so much charisma. He was very charismatic early on, but he had lost his charisma in the meantime. But through Eukodal, he could reinstall his charisma, being good in the room. And he would and I read like a lot of witnesses' reports, like from generals. A lot of them wrote books afterwards or made notes. What happened? They said when they were with Hitler in this room, they were convinced that Hitler knew something that they didn't know. Like he had a wonder weapon up his sleeve. Like he knew that the war would turn around and we would win, the Germans would win in the end, because he was so convincing on this Eukodal. So Hitler was very clever actually in using that drug to, for his like horrific vision,
Wow.
Yeah. And you can examine this like day by day, by studying the papers of Morel, and then also studying like other, accounts, because it's always good to look at more, not only have one source, but there's quite a lot on it. So it is quite surprising no one ever wrote about that before.
Well, it's fascinating because if you think about how much is written about Hitler and how much Hitler has been studied, that they didn't study that.
It's totally crazy, actually.
Because it has such a profound effect on the way you think and behave.
It does, yeah.